You subscribe yet? Hey look, there's a Tacoma behind me, so, and you can see my reflection, and yes, I'm just using a cell phone for this. Galaxy Note 10 Plus. Does pretty good. Anyway, at the Tacoma, working around the front here, and what we're looking at today is the spacers that I've installed. So I'm gonna flip around and we'll go over this real quick. Thank you for taking the time to watch, as I've always said, appreciate it. And we're just gonna continue working on different projects and doing reviews. And at this point, we've already installed these and ran them for probably about 100, 200 miles. So we're coming back to recheck the torque spec to make sure that the spacers have not lost their torque. And I'll flip around and we'll take a peek and I'll show you the installation on this. So these are the 1.5 inch spacers from KSP. These are Hubcentric, so the back side of the spacer is going to lock into the hub itself, and this side of the spacer is actually going to lock into the wheel. So you don't have a shear force. This spacer can't slide up and down, so you don't have a shear force. It's actually locked in with the aluminum, on top of locking in on the inside to the wheel hub and locking in on the outside to the wheel itself. I've got the extended lugs on these, so the extended lugs have a sleeve on the lug nut that goes further down into the channel where the actual bolt is, the stock lug that comes out of the wheel. So the stock lugs come out of the wheel to these points where these lug nuts are, and then KSP sends these with lug nuts actually pre-mounted in. This is that what is it, M12 by 1.5. All these lugs are the same. The lug bolts are the same thread, so the specification for torque on these is, I believe, 70 to 90 pounds. I'm doing all the torques on these to 80 pounds. I'm not going to overdo it, I'm not going to underdo it, so I'm doing these to 80. So I've got my torque wrench out. We've already got it set on foot-pounds to torque. Now the lug nuts that come from KSP are 19 millimeter, and the stock lug nuts on the Tacoma are 21 millimeter, so we kind of go back and forth. I'm just using an impact with my 21, so this is what I'm using to knock all the lug nuts off. And then we're not taking the spacer nuts off, all we're doing is taking the 19 millimeter socket and putting it on the impact, and then we're not the impact, we're putting on the torque wrench, and we're just checking these to torque to make sure that these are still at 80 foot-pounds. So we've already done the rear on both of these, so the spacer in the rear for both wheels is exactly the same. It's got a 1.5 inch spacer behind it, so as you can see, the tire sets out a little further. It actually, from this edge straight down from the fender to the edge of the tire, that's the number, that's the measurement that I wanted. So when the stock tire without the spacer was on here, it was in about here. So it was in about 1.5 inches, so I just wanted it to come just to the edge of the fender well here for the look. That's the look that I'm going for, so that's how I did my measurement. And it makes it so that the fender and the top of the tire at that edge of the tire are right over the top of each other. So that's my 1.5 inch, that's why I picked 1.5. KSP also does a 1.25. And this is the other side. We've already checked the torque specs on all 6 of these. They're all perfect. We didn't have any movement. We came over to the other side over here and did the same thing. All 6 are fine. We just got done doing the front, and all 6 are fine. Now, one of the advantages we have in not having to worry about the nuts coming loose over time on the nuts that come from the nuts that came from KSP are actually not the extended lug nuts. These spacers were like $115, and they had a $15 off discount, so I did the 1.5 inch spacers instead of the 1.25 because of my measurement, like I said. And then they came with the lug nuts that were just standard, just the acorn nuts. They just flange at the end, and that's it. But the extended nuts, it's not just the acorn nut, but there's an actual extension from this end of the acorn nut where it goes inside. There's actually more of a sleeve, and it actually really locks this in. So the extended nuts are like 50 bucks. So you're at about 150, 155 plus tax to get the spacer with the extended lugs versus going with a brand like Bora or Spidertrax. I can guarantee you Bora is doing the exact same thing. You know, it's a Hubcentric. It's got the same slot, the same hole, the same, you know, it's got the M12 by 1.5 because that matches the original lug nuts that come with the wheel hub assembly. Now on the extended lug nuts, when I put them in, I did use blue thread locker. I would not put these on without putting thread locker in. If you can imagine, if you go with an aftermarket wheel, the aftermarket wheel is going to come off of the front face of the hub assembly, but it's just the aluminum is just built into the wheel. So what we're doing is we're making this solid. We want this to stay solid, and I don't want these coming off. If I ever take the wheel off to change tires or anything, I'm just going to take the lug nuts off. I'm not going to take these off. So unless I had to take the rotor off, that would be the only reason to take this off if I had to break this loose. But typically you don't have to replace rotors very often anyway, so it's not a big deal. So I've got my spacer on. I got the blue thread locker. I got these to 80 foot-pounds, and when we put the wheel back on, we always do 80 foot-pounds on the torque wrench for the actual lug nuts, the lug nuts that go on the wheel. Now the back end, because you have an emergency brake, you can go inside and you can push the emergency brake in, and that's going to lock the back tires so they don't spin. So you can take the lug nuts and tighten everything down and do all the torque specs on the back wheel, and it's not going to be able to spin. On the front, you can't do that. Even if it's in park, if you have one tire in the ground and one off, because it's the CV axles, they will spin. So this is just spinning right now. I could probably, you know, the gear is in park, but the front's free because it's the four-wheel drive, so the front end is free right now. But what I do is I just go inside the truck and put a block between the pedal and the seat and just depress the brake pedal, or you can, just like I did a minute ago, my son was helping me, and so he was out here with the torque wrench checking the torque on these to make sure these were all still at 80, and I just went inside and just pushed the brake in, and the brake just pushes the pads onto the rotor, and so the rotor can't move, so that makes it so that you can tighten these down to spec. So if you get to that point and it keeps spinning on you, you can't figure out, and you're trying to jam something in here or trying to lock this thing up somehow so it can't spin, just go put something on the brake pedal to depress the brake pedal enough, or just have somebody help you for a second and you can just put these on. But the price on these is less than half than it would be if you got them from Bora or Spidertrax. I think Spidertrax, just for the spacers alone, was like $360, and if you bought extended lug nuts, you have to buy them separate. And so I'm at $155 plus tax with the spacer and the extended lugs in the 1.5 inch. The 1.25 inch, the 1 1/4 inch, is actually a little bit cheaper. I think it was like, I think it was $100 with $15 off, and the 1 1/2s were $115 with $15 off. So I got these all, a set of 4 for $100, and the extended lug nuts for $50, $55. I'll have the links in the description, and I'll post them in the video and editing. So that's pretty much it. We got this one done, so the next thing is just going to be to put the wheel back on. And what you can do with the front end, because of the wheel hub wanting to spin, you put the tire in place and get all the lug nuts tight, hand tight, snug, and then you can just drop the vehicle down enough so that the tire touches the concrete and it just gives a little bit of friction. Don't drop it down all the way, because you don't want to put any kind of force on the wheel if you don't have the lug nuts tightened down. But what I do is I just drop it down to where the tire is touching enough to create friction, and then I can tighten all the lug nuts. I don't use the impact for the lug nuts or for the spacer lug nuts, because the forward torque on the impact is actually pretty high, and I don't want to over torque. I don't want to snap any of these bolts. Now I've seen people come back and say, oh, my lug nuts are coming loose, and it came loose on the road and the wheel fell off and all that kind of stuff. But if you're buying a Hubcentric, which means the spacer is locked into the end of your wheel hub assembly and it's locked into the wheel, there's no shear force. So the only way that could have come loose is if your lug nuts completely came off, or were at the end and you just didn't tighten them up. So KSP has in their information that you're supposed to drive 100 to 200 miles or whatever and then retorque them. And the retorquing is probably just for your advantage. It's just to make sure that you didn't miss a lug nut. In our case, we haven't missed any, and we haven't found any that are loose, so I think KSP makes a good product. I think the bolts are fine. I don't think they're high tensile. They've got plenty of strength in them. It's the same thread as the stock thread that the wheels are bolted on. You can tell this is billet aluminum, and they just milled it. It's mill spec. Everything fits. Everything's tight. So I think this is a good product. I'd recommend it. And that's pretty much it for this. We're just going to finish up the front left and then switch over to the right, and we'll be done. But like I said, it does give it a better appearance. As you can see, you can imagine where the wheel was stock, and I'll have the comparison and the pictures and all that kind of stuff. But the wheels stick out a little bit more. You can tell in the front where the wheels stick out a little bit more. Now, with the spacer in reverse only on the front right tire, my tire rubs right here on this plastic, and it makes that noise. When I go past when I rub, because the outside edge of the tire here is what's rubbing. When I have this turn all the way to the left, the tire comes over here and it's rubbing on that plastic. I think when I first got here, I think the original owner had like pushed this plastic in and like bumped the plastic in or something like that, and it kind of like made it so that it didn't touch that spot or something. I can't remember, but I actually bumped it out after I bought it, and now I'm looking at what it would take to just, if it's either taking this plastic fender out or just coming around the corner at the bottom right here and then just cutting this plastic piece that's this little bottom piece. It doesn't protect anything. There's nothing in there. There's a hole in the bottom of it. I don't know if it just catches water or rainwater or what and just funnels it down here. I'm not sure exactly why this piece has to extend further down than this just being flat, but that's probably what will end up happening. Is I'll just cut this little tooth plastic thing that's just sticking off at the bottom here. I'll probably just cut this off. So that's it for this KSP 1.5 inch wheel spacer. Please stick around. We will be adding more videos to the channel. There will be more installs, more DIY. So thank you for taking the time to watch, and we will see you again soon. Don't forget to subscribe before you hit the stop button.